my drinks down in the club. I always keep that shit on top. My piece flash like a disco ball.
We are back, baby, with episode 2 of the Retroad Show, supported by our patrons. This time we are in a totally different country, over the bridge in Wales, Cardiff, checking out an incredible retro game shop called Super Tomato, ran by a lovely guy called Tom, who has been doing this for 16 years. If you love seeing content like this and want the Retroad Show to continue, head over to Patreon to get some extra benefits. And without further ado, let's check out Tom's shop.
Hi, I'm Tom. I run Super Tomato, a store that sells retro video games, old toys, and general odd Japanese ephemera that we pick up from Tokyo about every 4 months or so. We've been here 16 years on the outskirts of Cardiff, and we do our very best to provide a nice atmosphere and safe space for people to come and see things they enjoy that they might not see anywhere else. We have been here a long time. We've only been going to Japan for about half of that period. Prior to that, we had some good relationships at some shops over there and some wholesalers, but we'd always thought it would be financially difficult to travel over there, I suppose. You always think in your mind's eye, it's a grand a ticket at least, that kind of thing. And we found, pre-pandemic at least, that it is so much easier to go over there. It's a tremendously accessible place, that it's just the most lovely place in the world. So once we'd established, I guess, a pattern of doing that, we started going back 3 or 4 times a year. It's obviously a wonderful place to find things that are very, very unique that you wouldn't find readily in the UK by any stretch. And that's what we're always doing when we're over there. We're not necessarily looking for things that are common or garden, I suppose, as cool as those are. You're looking for the really sort of the odd but interesting bits and pieces, things like the Game Boy Pocket Sonar, the Bomberman Gold Coro cartridge, things that are things you wouldn't necessarily even find online, just very, very exciting and unusual bits and bobs. And that's the sort of real joy of going over there. It's look, ostensibly I'm going there for the shop, obviously it's a business thing, but I cannot emphasize the level of catharsis you get just shopping. And by God, I mean, I bring back a huge amount for myself as well, because you would, wouldn't you? So this is our cabinet of relative rarities, the slightly more obscure stuff. So you have a few Neo Geo unorthodox bits of hardware, a few special edition consoles, a few particularly rare games. We have our Coro prize draw Bomberman cartridge, which again, it's gold. What's not to like? It is a gold chrome cartridge. There are minor differences to the game itself, so it is a slightly different version of Bomberman 2. There's actually bigger differences in the Coro version of Bomberman 5, but that is, even within gold prize cartridges, tougher to track down. But whenever we go to Japan, there is always the cabinet of luxuries and video game stores over there, always has a gold Bomberman cartridge in there. So when I had the opportunity to grab one for the shop myself, absolutely bit the guy's arm off. So this is our Game Boy cabinet. We keep it closest to the door purely because it is the most popular thing in the shop. There's normally a few other Game Boy special editions in here, but the highlight we have at the moment is our Tokyo Yamori Giants Game Boy Advance, which is that one right there. Slightly less rare, but I think far more interestingly, is this amazing Game Boy carry case that we have behind it, which is a Mario Kart Advance one that I just think is the greatest thing ever. It's like a wee little lunchbox, but obviously Game Boy Advance shaped, and love stuff like that. We're forever trying to pick up, there's a lot of official console stands and things like that, little cradles for Super Famicoms and things in Japan, which are an absolute pig to take home. But I mean, just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Anything Nintendo branded that is a bit weird is always a winner. We do a lot in the way as well of handhelds, Game & Watch, things like that, Tomitronic, Grandstand.
Crazy Kong.
Yeah. You've got things like Munchman in its various incarnations that occasionally is officially licensed as Pac-Man, occasionally isn't, depending on exactly what period in time it is released. It's always unusual to get something with cardboard these days as well when it comes to the LCD, so it's always nice if something's in a box. You just don't see that sort of thing a lot these days. Titles by Codemasters tend to be slightly rarer. They come in a unique shape of cartridge as well. There are a few different ones. They're all quite difficult to get hold of these days. So this is a Bambino Kick the Goal electronic handheld game. It is actually surprisingly playable as far as handheld soccer games go. For whatever reason, a lot of the handheld football games are reasonably compulsive and have aged reasonably well. And anything by Bambino is always quite lavishly constructed in terms of, I guess, the design of the system itself, the form factor, how big and chunky it is, how vibrant the light tends to be behind the screen as well. Again, unusual to have it with the packaging and paperwork and stuff like that. So this is just a barcode battler, but it is a Japanese barcode battler. Now the concept behind these, in the UK, this is proper Argos clearance fodder. But the idea is that you scan barcodes and in essence use the barcodes like you would Pokemon or anything like that, like a sort of slightly more advanced top trumps. Whereas the emphasis over here was scan your baked beans and get your barcode off of that. In Japan, they lean rather more into things like, well, a lot of these are very much Gundam-esque and things like that. There you've got your Iron Cola, beer-themed robot there, ramen-themed guy, spoon. There are blank cards for you to make your own ones as well, just as there were with the Western machine. But you see it says Conveni Wars at the top, so the notion is convenience store. Yeah, convenience store, stat-based combat, but just so much more appealing, even in its, you know, white colorway versus the black one we got over here, which is very door and very, what as I say, very Argos bargain bin fodder. So this isn't necessarily a particularly uncommon thing to see within the UK, but the interesting thing about that particular Pokemon console, the Pokemon Battle Set, is the States and Japan didn't get that one. We also, in Europe, got the molded Pikachu with his little light-up cheeks, that version of the console, but the Pokemon Battle Set is only a UK, Sweden, and Australia release, rather bizarrely. Now, you would just assume, it being a Pokemon-themed N64, that would be available absolutely globally, because of course, why wouldn't it be? But it turns out it is actually geographically a relatively limited release. So I'm a Mega Drive and Super Nintendo guy. I very much grew up with the Super Nintendo. People tend to have a transition from machine to machine to machine. For me, it was ZX Spectrum, Sega Master System, Super Nintendo, and then PlayStation N64, stuff like that. But the one that resonated with me the most, and still does to this day, is Super Nintendo. And then in tandem with that, you then, I guess, look at the Mega Drive stuff as well, because those are very much what you would call the peak of the 2D pixel type game that at that stage sort of plateaus and disappears for a while with the advent of 3D, with the PlayStation, with the N64, with the Sega Saturn. So in terms of sprite work and gameplay design and things like that, those are the games that are very much at the very top of what potentially Nintendo or Square or Sega were doing at the time, and those are the ones that I still hold very dear to my heart and still, I guess, have the most joy when they come into the store. So this is the most mundane of things, but something that I really, really adore. So this is a cleaning cartridge for both Famicom and Super Famicom, and you just flip it upside down or the other way to use one way or the other. The reason I like it is anything that's in that old school Famicom colorway of the burgundy and gold, I think is just absolutely divine. So even the most mundane things like a cartridge cleaner is super, super interesting if it has that sort of old school Nintendo aesthetic. This is the later slimmed down version of the Super Famicom, the Super Famicom Junior. Now, fundamentally, it is just a Japanese Super Nintendo. I like this a lot just because the aesthetics of it very much put me in mind of the Nintendo PlayStation prototype that was found a few years ago. So although obviously this is very much not that, it has that same kind of minimalist aesthetic that I think they're going for at the time. And we don't see these particularly often in Japan. I just think they're super, super cool. I think of all the Super Famicoms you see, which is a lot, it's nice to have one that at least looks a little different and visually distinct, and is just a little bit more obscure. As far as the import stuff goes, it's mostly Japanese because of course we're going to Japan, but there's a large student population in the States, and that's sometimes where a lot of our American stuff comes from, whether that is students from the North American continent itself, or there's a lot of South American students, so again, they tend to have similar stuff. So that's where things like this amazing boxed Pocky and Rocky will come from, which is one of the harder games to get boxed, whether it is European or American. And I mean, a delightful, really, really lush pixel-based shoot 'em up. But yeah, we don't sell a huge amount of American stuff, but what we have, I mean, as with anything Super Nintendo, it's just nice to have it with the cardboard, have it with the box these days. That has become a tougher thing to do, particularly in recent years. In Japan, this was really rather successful, and you have a number of rather more exciting versions of the system, like this wonderful yellow one here. Whereas there is a very limited software offering within the West, in Japan you get all sorts of amazing things like these Ultraman games. You get cartridges in a number of vivid colorways. The way the Pico works is you plug the games in and turn the pages, of which there are literal pages, so it works like a book in tandem with the console itself. There's a stylus. There's interactive elements. There's all sorts of exciting devices, peripherals, and things you can get to go with it as well, like this amazing Sega steering wheel. Now, again, what I adore about this is, apart from the wheel itself, which is absolutely wonderful and clips onto the system, the game it comes with comes in this amazing vivid blue cartridge. I'm a sucker for a bit of coloured plastic, so this is very much up my street. You can even get Pokemon games for it as well, so it's a really interesting, I guess, cultural artifact of a very early period where Sega and Nintendo were working together for the first time. The way this would work, let's grab one of the games. So, game plugs in there, it does connect to the TV. Works just like a Sega Mega Drive, so you have an output to the television, a display, but also as you turn the pages of the book, that interacts with the game. As you use the touch pen with the book, that interacts with what you see on screen. That's your control pad there. It's sort of a fascinating lost bit of Sega's, I guess, home history that no one really talks about these days. So we do get these traded in pretty regularly. I always aspired to get hold of one of these. Like when I had an Xbox, I just could not find one. And of course, once we started getting them in, yeah, you think this is phenomenal. I get to try this again. But it is absolutely the driest thing in the world. I mean, it's the video game equivalent of being a JCB driver. So it's not the most stimulating action-based game. And of course, it only works with Steel Battalion and Steel Battalion Line of Contact. So you have a choice of two games, which are in essence interchangeable. You know, it's great. It's a collectible. It's enormous. It's heavy, to say the least. It's a real hefty bit of kit. Would I recommend it as a gameplay experience? Yeah, probably not, no. I mean, the goal ultimately is to have a space that celebrates all that wonderful stuff that perhaps you don't find anywhere else. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, anyone who steps over that threshold and walks into the shop, you don't have to buy anything. You know, you're more than welcome to come and look around. We're grateful for everyone who just walks in through the door. The whole notion is that this is a place that is safe, that is nice, that is calm, where you can see and explore things that are within your field of interest that you perhaps would not be able to elsewhere. And that's all we really want to do, to have a space where people can enjoy and celebrate that, because there are so few of those left these days.
A big thank you to Tom for opening up his store and letting me film for the day. It's truly an incredible place, and this is why I wanted to make this series, to shine light on these awesome stores across the UK and the globe. I did pick up a couple of things. I had to pick up that Game Boy Advance lunchbox. I think you call it a lunchbox. You just pull the triggers back and you get like a mini lunchbox in there. But I am 100% going to store my cartridges in this, and it's a Japanese product as well, which just looks a little cooler as well. So big up Tom for bringing that back from Japan on his trip. And then I picked up a box version of a Game Boy Pocket case. You don't often see these boxed, so I wanted to add that to my collection as well, all reasonably priced. I did as well put an official Retro Dodo t-shirt behind the counter, so the first person that comes into Tom's store in Cardiff and says they've watched this video will get a free t-shirt. So again, thank you for watching. In the next episode, we are going to a totally different country again, so that should be 3 episodes and 3 different countries. I have 2 episodes lined up that I will be filming over the next month or so. So do subscribe if you want to see more. And if you do enjoy them, please support on Patreon. That's the thing, keeping this channel and this series alive. As per usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.